Another big day in financial markets here in the U.S., but while I have the chance and it's still relevant, I do want to quickly review the results of the Canadian election. Um, Ultimately, it doesn't look like it really made a whole lot of difference. It seems like the parties are kind of where they were before the election. Ironically enough, the Conservatives won the popular vote and the Liberals won the Electoral College. It's kind of an inverse of what we have here in the United States normally. So it'd be funny to hear, hearing up there. I don't know if this happened, but like let's say the Conservatives arguing in favor of a popular vote, and the Liberals defending what is essentially an Electoral College. And I think for a couple of the small parties, the NDP and the PPC, they would be even more open to, as small parties typically are, to that popular vote / proportional representation argument. You look at the NDP, for example, they won over 16% of the vote, I think, but they ended up with about the same amount of seats. I don't know what the final count was, but around the same amount of seats as the Bloc Québécois, which only got like 7.2% of the vote, I think. So they won, like 9 points more than double what Bloc Québécois won. But of course, since Bloc Québécois, they're smart. I shouldn't say smart. I mean, it's just they're, by the nature of what they are, they're a separatist party. Their support is concentrated in a small area of Canada. Geographically, it's not spread out across the entire country. And so even though they're a small percentage of the national popular vote, that's concentrated in a small area, and so they're able to carry a whole bunch of ridings, around 30-ish. Now the Greens, they didn't fare too well. They got like 2.2% of the vote, but they picked up a couple seats. Sure, they got barely any support, but at least they've got representation in Parliament. They're there. The PPC, on the other hand, won over 5%, I think 5.2%, of the vote nationally, and 0 seats because they just don't have enough support. It's concentrated in any one riding to actually win. Even Maxime Bernier's own riding, Beauce, I believe it's pronounced, he was unable to win there, which is not surprising considering he lost there back in, 2018, when he was actually a sitting member of Parliament, because he used to be, of course, a Tory, and he left the party and said, no, I'm going to start my own party. And even in his own riding, he couldn't maintain his seat. They went and voted for whatever the Tory party shill who replaced Bernier on the ballot. They went and voted, robotically voted Conservative anyway. So it seems to me, after I saw that, I said, oh, well, Bernier doesn't even have any genuine popular support amongst his own constituents. They're not voting for him, at election time because it was him. They were only voting for him because he happened to be, the guy with a C next to his name instead of, the guy with an R next to his name like we have here in the United States. These people are just partisan hacks, and they'll vote for whoever their party puts up. So if their party puts up Bernier, they'll vote Bernier. If the party puts up somebody else, they'll vote for that guy. And so I didn't expect that to change this time. I don't know what the exact breakdown was in his writing, but, it doesn't matter. He lost. They lost everywhere. But, 5%, that's, that's notable. But considering that the PPC has a total monopoly on, anti-lockdownism, on common sense, on any sort of remote idea of freedom, that's pretty sad. Like Canada's screwed because everybody else very pro lockdown, very pro totalitarianism. That was undisputed. Nobody disputes that stuff. Everyone wants a vaccine mandate, pretty much. I think not even the Tories are against that at this point. And if they are, in a couple of weeks they'll be for a vaccine mandate. So I think that Paul Godfrey is correct when he ranks Canada amongst the tied with Germany for being the most decadent Western country. I mean, there's not a lot of redeeming qualities as far as Canada is concerned. They can't even muster a few riots like the Australians have, and overall, I think that Australia seems to be in a worse position right now. It seems to be doing worse than Canada. But at least there is some remnant in Australia that is putting up a bit of a fight. In Canada, though, 5% in an election, which means you're not going to get, at that point, there's no real remnant. 5%, that's a rounding error. It's not anything meaningful as far as I'm concerned. 5% of the people could have just walked in the polling place, never heard of them, and said, "Oh, I guess I'll vote for these guys. I don't like any of the other options. I'll just pick the one I don't know." Because, it's kind of like UKIP. UKIP's support was evenly spread across the entirety of Great Britain, and they never really had a seat in Parliament. Occasionally, I think Farage had won a couple of times, but, in the time that I had been following UKIP, they never had any seats in Parliament, because they won, a small percentage of the vote, pretty much in every district across the country. But at this stage, I think that a consolation for the PPC would have been if they'd been able to play spoiler to the Tories. Then the Tories would have felt like they had to listen to them. But from what I saw, it doesn't seem like the PPC really spoiled a whole lot for the Tories. Places like, and again, I didn't check every single riding individually, but just looking at the map, like Alberta is still solidly blue for the Conservatives. We did not see, the NDP or the Liberals pick off, a ton of seats in Alberta because people were splitting their vote between the PPC and the Tories. So my advice to any Canadian, the very few of you, people like Viva Fry, who have any interest in living a normal life and having, freedom, just try and get to the United States. Everybody else is coming here from around the world, so you might as well too. At least Canadians can pretty well blend in the U.S. People wouldn't even necessarily know that you're foreign. You could just say, "Hey, I'm from Minnesota," and 99% of the people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So, considering that Bernier went from 1.6% of the vote to 5.2%, it's hard for me just to say, oh, okay, yeah, you should throw in the towel. But, if there were any time for a party like Bernier's to break through, it would be this time in history. I don't know how the stakes could be higher. And so if in this environment where every major party has, just completely thrown in their lot with totalitarianism and violating the Nuremberg Code, wanting to strap people down in chairs and shove needles into their arm against their will. If that won't get people to vote for your party when you're literally the only party saying, "Hey, let's not do that," let's let people make their own medical decisions. Let's let people walk outside. Let's let people go to the park. If you can't muster more than 5% of support with that in that political climate, your country is done. Like worse than Cold War era Poland or Czechoslovakia or something like that, because in those countries, sure, they had totalitarian regimes, but there was a strong remnant of people who didn't support those things, and had there been real elections, you would have seen that. But up in Canada, I think they have a better electoral system certainly than the United States. So I think it's a lot much better indicator of public opinion than U.S. elections. And I think the people of Canada have spoken. They're as bad or worse than the Australians, potentially worse, because like I said, over yesterday or so in Melbourne, there was some good rioting that went on against vaccine mandates. But you're just not going to see anything like that in Canada. I think that good people in Canada best off leaving. 5% of the Canadian voters. That's a small percent. That's a very small number of people. What is 100,000? 100,000 Canadians. If that's all there are that value this stuff, we can take you in this country. There's plenty of room for 100,000 Canadians in the United States. I mean, again, we take millions of people from the whole rest of the world. We just took tens of thousands of random Afghans off the streets of Kabul. You know, if you're a Canadian, you're probably a skilled worker anyway. I mean, find a job here, move down here, get out of that hellhole. It's cold up there anyway. And hey, if you like the cold, just jump across the border. You don't even have to go far. You can just go right to the American side of the border. Go to Minnesota, Michigan, North Dakota, Montana. Not Washington. You don't want to go to the state of Washington. But yeah, it might sound pessimistic, but you know what? And you can't win them all, especially in times as dire as these. There's going to be a lot of. Most of the world is not salvageable at this point. And if you're able to get somewhere where you can be free, take the opportunity. So that's about all I have to say about the Canadian election. With that said, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.